It's lovely to see so many people flowing in to this event. First, I'd like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations as the traditional owners of the land on which RMIT University stands, where we are here today, and to pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and to Aboriginal elders of other communities who may be here today. So, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for our screening of the Flight Paths, Freeways and Railroads, and the launch of our report, Automated Decision Making in Transport Mobilities. I just got back from the UK, so if I fall asleep while I'm speaking or appear to be confused at any moment, that's why. I just thought I would mention that because this is the time of the day that I would usually drop off to sleep completely. But I'm going to do my best to host this event today. Now, I do have notes. So first, I want to just give this event some context. The Centre for Automated Decision Making and Society has 4 focus areas, one of which is the Transport and Mobilities focus area. And the focus area then seeks to bring together work across the whole of the centre around transport and mobilities. And this event this evening presents some of the work that we in our Monash node of the centre have been doing, which focuses on transport and mobilities in Australia. Now, so that's not all of the projects that are being done in the focus area. There's other work being done across the centre, which is really exciting, and which we'll be showcasing in our Transport and Mobilities Focus Area Symposium, which is going to be held in October. So do keep in touch about that and watch this space, because that's going to be another really interesting event. But within that, in our Monash node, we have a project which we call Future Automated Mobilities, which is an umbrella project for a series of pieces of smaller sub-projects and pieces of work that we're doing. And our team at Monash, so first, Tao Fan, and Tao's not here, Tao's actually in a fellowship in the US at the moment. Jeni Lee, who will be meeting soon, Emma Quilty, who will be meeting soon, and myself. So we form our key Transport and Mobilities Focus Areas team as part of the People Programme in the centre at Monash. Now, the Future Automated Mobilities project then, at Monash then, we're working on a series of activities, most of them which are future orientated. We're trying to understand what the future of automated mobilities might look like. And we're trying to do that from perspectives that challenge or complicate, as we like to say, the dominant narratives, kind of which are presented by the tech industry, presented by government, and the transport industry, which kind of try to map out the way that technologies and automation are going to change our experience of mobilities in the future. We instead are trying to focus on that from a people perspective, and specifically from the perspective of people who are not usually represented or accounted for in the dominant narratives. And you'll be learning a lot more about that as we go on, and Jen and Emma present their work. Now, within our projects, we've been developing workshops, ethnographic research, and what we're going to be looking at today, 2 specific pieces of work. A scoping study. Now, the scoping study for the Transport and Mobilities Focus Area looks at 3 dimensions. First, a review of the dominant narratives from the literature and the dominant industry narratives. Secondly, a review of media reports. And thirdly, a series of interviews we've been doing with key stakeholders. Part of the scoping study we're going to be introducing today is a report that Emma Quilty has developed, has led on, which is based on our reviews of the industry reports. And after that, as you know, we're going to be having a screening of a series of films that Jeni Lee has created, which Jen herself will introduce, so I won't spoil that. So the report, which Emma's going to be speaking to you about, reveals where automated decision-making is present across transport mobilities in Australia and how industry, government and other stakeholders envision it with part of our futures. It also looks and presents some of our insights about the limitations of those future visions. So then, as I said, we'll be screening the series of films. And after the screening then, we're going to be having a panel discussion which I'll host, where the film participants, who you'll be meeting in the films and who Jen will present properly, Darren Moyle, Brenton Lillecrapp, Orhan, Karagoz, Michaela Schmidt will be part of this panel, and we'll also be able to ask some questions and have an audience discussion. So, before my jet lag completely takes over, I'm going to hand over to Emma, who will be presenting the report for you.
Thanks, Sarah. And thank you, everyone, for coming. I know it's been a really long day, an amazing event. So just quickly, this first slide features an image with people walking through a busy tunnel, and the title of our report, Automated Decision-Making in Transport and Mobilities, a review of industry trends and visions for the future. So the authors of this piece are myself, Sarah Pink, Tao Fan, and Jeni Lee. And I just want to give a huge thank you to Mark Andreevich, Jason Sadowski, and Chris O'Neill for their input in this report. So the report has not been launched online yet, so this is a really exclusive preview, and we have a very small set of copies that I won't have enough for everyone. So if you ask me really, really nicely, then you can get a copy. So what I'm going to do this evening is really briefly touching on the key implications, because I know we want to get to the films, of the key findings, and then giving you a sneak preview of Podman. And I have the clicker in one of my pockets. Oh, thank you, you're ahead of me. So this image is a crosswalk in America with a blurred image of a bus and people moving with the sunset in the background. So the key claims we identified in the report reveal a really entrenched framework based on a long-term set of assumptions and a set of key benefits relating to automated vehicles and systems that really continue on to inform industry policy, investment and STEM research agendas in Australia. So it invites the question of how and where new innovation must happen and where we need to look to investigate and understand the realistic and optimistic implication of new automated technologies and systems for Australian people and society. So the assumption underpinning all of the key claims reviewed in the report is that a car-dependent future city will be efficient, safe, sustainable and equitable. So we ask if this is practically possible or desirable enough to be pursued at any cost, to the neglect of less utopian but more feasible alternatives. So autonomous passenger vehicles are a technology that seem to be on this endless horizon. However, as the reports show, the predictions keep getting bumped further and further forward, promising that autonomous vehicles are just around the corner. So the image on the third slide shows a busy intersection at night with blurred colours. So the promise that automation will solve one of the foremost problems of contemporary transport congestion is not new. This idea that introducing new technologies will fix congestion on roads stretches back all the way to the 1940s, to what Peter Norton terms the first wave of technological hype around mobilities that was heralded by the Futurama exhibit at the New York World Fair. The promise of a future with zero crashes, zero emissions and zero congestion was born way back then. So safety is also another key selling point of autonomous vehicles, and the reason why proponents assert their widespread and rapid adoption is necessary. So presenting full automation as the primary solution really risks detracting attention and resources away from implementing more immediately and effective ways to increase safety using non-technological means. So the image on this slide shows Brenton with his arms out wide and an illustration of a car overlaid on top. So this is a little sneak peek of the films that we will be screening very shortly. So the introduction of automated mobilities is treated as though it is synonymous with the increase of accessibility for groups who currently have low to zero levels of mobility. What we discovered was that while these claims are used to support the development and testing and implementation of all of these technologies, the details of exactly how these technologies will increase accessibility is missing or very, very thin. So there's a lack of planning around how historically disadvantaged groups will be able to access these forms of mobility, especially when the adopters of these technologies are predicted to be those who already possess high levels of income, education, and mobility. So the image on this slide is of a person in a self-driving car using their laptop and their phone simultaneously, no hands on the steering wheel. So the macro level trends and predictions we found in the report were both conservative and technologically deterministic. So they assume automated technologies will drive change in how people and things move without accounting how people themselves might want to move in the future. They assume that automated and electric vehicles will come about as the obvious solution to environmental and energy issues without accounting for the social, cultural and political complexity of the Australian landscape. They assume that particular consumer groups will take up automated transport mobility options without accounting for the complexity of people's everyday lives. And they also assume that shifts in the future of work without considering how these workers will see these futures. So this next image is of the Sydney cityscape and features the infamous Harbour Bridge. So what is interesting to note about the implications of this study for Australia is that the key claims and the macro trends made in the reports could apply to just about any other, and I hate using this word, developed country. So Australia is not falling behind in the autonomous mobility game. Rather, what it lacks at the moment and where it cannot afford to fall behind is in the development of a careful and considered approach to considering how these technologies are necessary or if they are just creating new problems that we'll need to solve. Okay, so this final image is of Podman, and in this image, Podman is lounging back in his driverless pod. He is working on his laptop and enjoying a coffee that was provided in his luxury pod. The scene also includes 2 other pods without the occupants being visible. The motion of the pod demonstrates that the future of movement in the pods is seamless and it's smooth, and there's no visible traffic lights because in the future, we don't need traffic lights. So we've taken the anticipated trends of the future changes to transport mobilities and then applied them to these kind of everyday settings. The stories are told through the perspective of 3 different personas we've created to represent the profiles of future users of these technologies. So for each persona we're going to present a vignette and an image to kind of visually and creatively communicate this, not our vision, but the transport industry's vision and highlight its limitations. So this is the first of the personas, Podman. He's a member of the kinetic elite, a hypermobile and hyper-individualized techno-hedonist. I am currently preparing a paper that will deep dive into this figure, so you can follow me on Twitter and see when I publish that if you want to. So a breakdown of this persona as well as family man and the student is available in our report. So you can enjoy more information about the key claims and macro trends and our analysis of each of them in that report, and we'll let you know when we've published it online. So now I would like to invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy our 3 films.
I would not like to use an automatic car because it's risky, but I wouldn't mind using smartphones.
It says 11:18. Comes. What's the time now?
Device unlocked. 11:15.
3 more
off.
minutes.
Yep.
I have an old-fashioned talking mobile. Well, I plan to get a smartphone. They're definitely transformative, and if you apply certain apps to them, they're basically like a mechanical version of a guide dog in a way. Yeah, I've chosen not to have a guide dog because it's a bit too much responsibility. The travelling cane that I generally tic-tac on the ground is the one that really helps you to be more independent.
Orhan, today I'll be training you to use 3 different travel applications that you can use once you receive your phone. And the first one's called Microsoft Soundscape.
Can we go now?
Beacon set? Yep, let's do it.
Beacon one's quite easy. You basically choose a certain location and it guides you to that location, like it makes a particular sound.
Beacon, 805 meters.
I think it is better when you hear the noise. It's a bit like drawing a map in your mind. Am I making sense? But you also rely on your own skills as well. You don't fully rely on your technology because sometimes it's not always accurate.
Beacon within 15 meters. Audio beacon has been muted.
There we are. Sometimes I would like to have both options, using people and using technology. And I think I-rate is a good combination of that. You are using technology, but at the same time you are relying on a human.
I'm going to call an IRA agent for you, okay? So that's currently calling, and they'll automatically see your GPS location as well as see out of the camera.
Hi there, my name is Orhan. Could you please direct me to the entrance of Broadmeadow Shopping Centre?
Gotcha, okay. So if you go forward here...
I thought that was a unique experience and I really felt comfortable with that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, let's go a little bit more forward. Yeah, there we go.
Left, okay?
Looks like there's like that. Yeah, there we go.
That person becomes your eyesight to navigate you around.
One last pole on your left, and then we'll have the entrance here. It looks like it's an automated door straight ahead.
Okay, there we are.
Yeah.
Thanks for your help.
Of course, you're welcome.
Have a lovely day. Enjoy your day. Bye.
So take care now.
I think I would definitely use that if I got lost, if there aren't anybody around.
This is one of my favourite apps because I think it shows the emerging technology of where we're going. Firstly, it uses not GPS like we were doing outside, so we're not tapping into the satellites. Here, it's actually using augmented reality. So we're recording the path of travel out of the phone camera, and it's using the gyroscope and the accelerometer on the phone to keep note of your directionality, as well as using machine learning to track you back at a later date. Okay. So I'm going to start navigation. All right.
Start navigation. Button start. Stop navigating. Turn left. Correction for phone/body offset will be updated as you start walking. Starting navigation. Continue straight. If you are having trouble following the route, press the Get Directions button.
Plus, I really like that app as well.
That's the app Clue. Someone wouldn't necessarily need to call an orientation mobility specialist. They might be able to open that app, and that app could give you some of that basic information.
I don't think it will fully replace your job.
No. Technology at the moment kind of fills in some of the gaps that we might miss. It tells us about the shop that we might not have seen, but at the moment it's not necessarily always going to be accurate telling us that the stairs coming up or that there's a crack in the pavement that our cane needs to tell us about it.
It's going to help me once I get this phone. I mostly tend to comment with a family member, but with the Western cultures, they just put too much emphasis on being independent, and now they are trying to use technology for that. Like, they're just trying to minimize dependency on other humans. Like, you have to be, sometimes you need to be dependent on other humans. I'm definitely looking forward to technological innovation. I do appreciate it and I think we should make the most of it, but when we are relying on technology, we should not isolate ourselves and to reduce the human participation in our lives.
Thank you for calling IRA. This is Jeni. What would you like to see today?
Hi, just firstly wondering if you could tell me what the label is on this jar.
Sure, then go ahead and lower the camera just a little bit for me. And then rotate the jar back in the original direction just a little bit. I'm missing part of the label. It says Chiltern Forest Mix Honey.
Okay, great, thank you. I can call people in America and ask them to do things for me, like read print or look up directions. I do circus training in Albury, so it requires me to catch 2 buses and then it's about a 10-minute walk. The first time I did that commute, I was terrified. I had my new guide dog. We'd only been out of training for not even a week. I had quite a challenging experience with my previous guide dog, and was really unsafe. But I knew what the curbs all kind of felt like and where the traffic lights were. I knew that if I needed to, I could call my guide dog trainer, or I could use Ira to get my sense of direction. So it was really scary, but it was also helpful knowing that I had lots of backup plans, and I had my phone with me where I could access most of those backup plans.
Forward, outside.
But as it happened, my guide dog found everything she needed to. She found all the traffic lights.
Where is it? Where's the pole? Find the pole. Good girl. Yeah. Okay, up to the curb.
Found the circus building that she'd been taught to find.
Good girl.
Yeah, it all worked out, and with the right resources and technology, it made me feel really independent and gave me a feeling of freedom that I've not felt for a long time. So, open PTV screen reader.
Select on map. Select from stop. Button. Recent stops. Watertop, Castleton Street, Castleton Street / Victoria Cross Street. Leave now. Search. Button.
Ellie, my guide dog, is very good at finding the opposite curve. That's her favourite game, something she does really well, which I'm really thankful for because crossing roads is one of my least favourite things to do. Especially with electric vehicles, I can't hear them coming. I think what makes me nervous about the idea of, these self-driving cars coming out, I've always drawn confidence from knowing that 99% of the time drivers are looking where they're going and they would see me coming. And it makes me nervous that this technology will not be able to do that with the same care as a living, breathing person.
Call Albury Taxis.
Call in Albury Taxis.
Your taxi has been booked and will arrive as soon as possible.
I prefer not to use Siri just because I don't like people hearing what I'm doing in public, but sometimes it is kind of quicker. I often use my phone at least to kind of check my general location, or even just simple sometimes as being like, Siri, where am I? To make sure I'm on the right track. It kind of is my eyes, I suppose. I could never imagine Ellie being replaced with an automated system. I'm sure a robot or something could beep at me or tell me when I'm at a particular traffic light or what street I'm at, but I don't think it could guarantee the same accuracy. My guide dog will never run out of batteries. She'll never run out of phone reception. And I'm able to teach her things and communicate with her in a way that I could never with a piece of technology.
Travel in the future, so I'd love to have a case. Oh, and it just goes bigger, so I basically click a button, it's the size of a case, and it becomes my car. So it's as small as a case, and then it becomes a car. So when I could go shopping, I could decrease it in size, toss it up, put it in my pocket. Even better. Don't need to worry about parking, nothing like that. Yeah, don't need to worry about it. I'm very happy that I've got my car. My mother and father live quite far away, and obviously I need that car to be able to get there if there's an emergency. If I had to get on the bus for something, to go and see them, I could be waiting for, a long time. Like if I had the car, car, I can get there quickly. You know, where do you want to go? I want to go there. You know, what do you want? Just get it done. Yeah, and that's why, you know, I drive. My car's all right. It's okay. It's not amazing. I'm not a rich man. So, you know, it's not like I can just sit back and have an electric car that does everything myself. I wish I could just sit back and I could chat. You know, I could chat automatically and it does it all for me. Like in planes as well, you press a button and it sets off and the deaf can chat as much as they like. I like the idea of that. But driving, some deaf people are confident while they're signing. Some people are very, very scared. They grip into the steering wheel and don't talk to me, don't talk to me. I'm trying to focus on the road, you know? I'm looking at traffic lights and you want to talk when the traffic lights are on, but no, because they're not confident. And years and years ago, many deaf didn't drive, you know, they weren't allowed to drive because they just weren't allowed because obviously they couldn't hear, they was deaf. I'll have my phone and I'll Google on the phone as well, Google Maps, and I'll follow what it says. Perfect, you know, if I didn't have Google Maps like we didn't have before, you just have a normal map, you'd be stopping. Flipping the page, stopping, flipping the page, driving, be stopping to petrol, be asking about where things are. And if you broke down, oh my goodness, RAA, how do I ring the RAA? I'm deaf. How do I do that? So now we can text RAA, now you can text them. So finally now we've got messages and we can basically do that and that's, wow, it works so well. Like, I'd love a new car to be honest with you, you know, that would be great, you know. But the one problem is in regards to deafness. In regards to brakes as well, like the brake pads, for example, hearing people can hear it, they know. In regards to hearing, you can't hear ambulances. Sometimes when an ambulance is going past, it can be quite frightening, you know. And suddenly it's there, you know. It's like, oh God, there's an ambulance there right in your mirror. So dreaming about the future, ideal travel. So when you've got the map, you're like, I want to go there, and I just press it on the map, and then it takes you straight to where you want to go. Oh, there it is. Pops up straight in front of you. I'd love that.
So we're just going to have we're just going to set up the panel, and in the meantime, Emma's going to share some of the printed copies of her report so people can have a flick through while you're just waiting for us to set up.
everyone for coming. It's my absolute privilege to share these films with you, all the very first screening of these 3 short films with all of the participants here, with the red carpet, so to speak. So very, very excited to share it all with you this evening. So the Flight Path films were a collaborative project with our Future Automated Mobilities team, Sarah Pink, Emma, Quilty, Tao Fan, and they were also a collaboration with everyone you can see in front of you here, Brenton Lillecrapp, Michaela Schmidt, Orhan, Karagoz and Darren Moyle. We were also lucky to collaborate with Jan Rothjusen and Franke Wiggers in the Netherlands, who added another layer of insight to the films with their beautiful illustrations and animation. This project really draws on the principles of communication for social change. So the central idea is that we work together with participants in a project as opposed to making documentary films about people. So we aim to create communication tools that serve a number of different functions. So as well as research purposes, they serve educational, strategic, advocacy and participatory communication objectives. So the ideal of participatory communication is really that people get to identify their own challenges in their everyday lives, and then they can innovate some of their own solutions to those problems. In the best type of participatory media project, it's quite empowering for the participants. So I guess that's over to them whether they felt empowered by that, or probably sometimes just frustrated and annoyed, I imagine. But I am hoping that the overall process has been a positive process for them all. So the project quite simply asks, how could technology best assist us to move about freely in the future? And we began by creating a short film prompt that we shared with the participants. They were images of future transport that were created by the industry. There were also some images of e-waste and some artist-generated images of future transport that were a bit grubbier and grittier than the industry versions. So after they'd had a week or so to reflect on that film prompt, we conducted an interview and filmed the commutes that you just saw then in the films. So the edits were then run past our team and run past all of the participants 4 times, I think, each, and everyone got to put their feedback in at every stage of the process, which we took on board. So really it has been a collaborative project from start to finish. The films really explore ways of making transport more accessible to deaf and blind commuters. However, I've also been learning on the job how to create more accessible films and filmmaking processes. So this learning experience has been incredibly valuable, and I'm very grateful to Michaela, Orhan, Brenton and Darren for their patience and guidance with all of this. Just to introduce you to the film stars here. When I first met Brenton, he was doing translations at an NGO in Adelaide, Survivors of Torture and Trauma. We're running a course in chronic pain management. An Auslan interpreter was interpreting for the pain psychologist, and Brenton read her signs and interpreted this in turn to a more accessible sign language for a group of deaf Bhutanese survivors of torture and trauma. And his communication skills and ability to connect with people really blew me away, and I'm continuing to learn from Brenton. We flew over together from Adelaide today, and we fly back in a couple of days, so it's an ongoing journey of learning more about accessibility and transport for me right now as we speak. Michaela has been a great teacher. She's been very direct in educating me when I made things or might have overlooked things or oversimplified more complex situations, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. So thank you, Michaela. I do like some direct guidance when it comes to new things. Michaela works as a blind advocate. She's a performer and an access consultant, and she has a particular interest in making arts accessible to regional and remote communities and people with disabilities. So her work's really quite amazing. Orhan also continues to open my mind to new insight with his sensitive understanding of social interactions. He's an anthropologist, and he's really highlighted to me how Western ways and systems sometimes railroad us in a way, and technologies too, sometimes railroad us into a way of doing things in quite a limited way. So after filming Orhan, I changed the name of the films from Flight Paths, Freeways and Open Roads to Flight Paths, Freeways and Railroads. So Darren's work as an orientation and mobility coach is fascinating. His knowledge of mobility technologies is really impressive. You've all watched him in action now, and it really is incredible watching him as he guides people through with the orientation and mobility apps. And as Orhan said in the film, the mobile phone is not going to be replacing him just yet. So the next steps for the project, we're looking at distribution for the short films, educational distribution, and they will be accessible versions. So we'll have embedded audio descriptions and closed captions. And we're looking at targeting the films to niche audiences to create the most impact in the real world. So if anyone has any stakeholders they think that they'd like to target the film towards, please share the links with me, and I will forward them on. Now I'll just hand over to Sarah, who will host the panel Q&A, and you can ask everyone your questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen, and thank you all. The films are amazing, and it's wonderful to see them on this big screen. So I've got a quick question for each of our panellists first, and then we'll open up the audience, so it will give everybody time to start thinking about what you might like to ask as well. So first for Orhan, and I'm also an anthropologist, so I'm kind of keen to hear the answer to this question. So as an anthropologist, are there any observations or concerns you'd like to raise about equity and accessibility for future travel?
Well, unfortunately, yes, I would like to. First of all, when you look at the roads and railways, or any forms of travelling or mobility, it's particularly designed for mainstream people. What I mean by mainstream people are people with no disabilities, or people who don't have any disabilities, or people who do not come from a marginal background. So it's particularly designed for mainstream people. And sometimes when we try to access those mobilities or those roads, there can definitely be some difficulties. Yes, they are trying to overcome those difficulties, but there are still, I think, things needs to be done to improve this. And this, I would like to talk about this a bit more. Sometimes, like when people think that they are doing something to make life easy for vision impaired or blind people, they just do it without consulting us. Like they started consulting us recently. Before they never did. Like it's a bit like advocating for blind people or disabled people without really asking their opinions, and that can sometimes make things a bit more difficult. Or when they try to help us, that may not necessarily help us. Am I being clear, Sarah?
Mm-hmm. Everybody's nodding in agreement with you as well as you speak. Yeah, absolutely. So I'll move on to Michaela now. And Michaela, I wanted to ask you if you could describe some of the differences that you've found with regional travel as opposed to the city, because I imagine those are quite different experiences.
Yes, very different. Thanks, Sarah. So I guess I grew up in a farming family. My dad's a farmer and a fencing contractor, and often goes to all sorts of strange little towns in the middle of nowhere. And I guess while I'm really excited about the advances in technology, you know, I can't, you know, when you live regionally, sometimes you just can't access your Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or phone reception. As I said, like, I'm really thankful my guide dog will never run out of phone reception or batteries and yes, I guess and the other thing about the city is that obviously more access to those things, but also maps are updated more regularly and more reliable. I often find up in Albury-Wodonga or in smaller regional towns that it's just like maps are out of date, and I actually don't find I can't get directions on things like Google Maps, partly because I just don't know if the information is reliable enough to give me the information I need. So yeah, it's just I think technology is really exciting. The further out of a big city you are, the harder it is to access that technology. And so I think those are some of the things. But then also people like Darren, it's harder, like they can't travel to regional areas as often. A lot of mobility instructors seem to live in the city for some reason. So, I guess I'm excited by if there's some kind of automated technology that can help them travel to me quicker if I need to learn something, or, my guide dog needs a bit of brush up on her training. But yes, there's just lots of complications to think about in terms of regional travel that people in the city don't have to worry about as much, I think. Yeah.
Thanks, Michaela. And I think it would also be really great if automated technologies and systems that are designed, for places outside the cities, actually the starting point could be thinking about designing with disability in mind. So that's super important. So I'm going to move on to Darren now, who Michaela just mentioned. So Darren, I wanted to ask you how automated technology is impacted on travel, people who are blind, who have low vision.
I think a great deal. I mean, we saw from both Michaela and Orhan in that video, in those great videos, that it's making a huge impact, in particularly around the accessibility to information. Even use a personal story, having low vision myself. I moved to a new suburb in Sydney, and walking down the street, turning on the first app you saw Orhan use, Microsoft Soundscape, was able to hear what shops. I heard about a French bakery that was across the road that I wouldn't have known about, and I heard about other stores and other shops, that were useful at a later date, and information that maybe in the past that would have only been really accessible to me or someone else who was blind or has low vision if someone else deemed it to be important enough to mention. They know you like Thai food, so they might mention it to you, but they might not mention about the Japanese restaurant because they don't know you like Japanese. But the benefit of having this automated kind of information that technology brings a more free and accessible way of accessing information, which is why I'm so passionate about it in my own personal way that I like to travel, and also the work that I do working with the clients I get to work with. And I think, going forward, the sky really is the limit around sort of what augmented reality is doing in terms of, you saw that last app, Clue, tracking the path of travel by, actually not using GPS but recording the path with the machine learning and accelerometer in the phone, with things, emerging technologies like LiDAR and augmented reality glasses. Imagine recording a path of travel and being spoken through as you travel in real time. So I think really it's just about having greater access to information, and it's empowering to be able to go to the bus stop and not have to be able to read what that bus stop says, but being able to simply open your phone and use accessibility software to hear when the bus is coming and if it's late, if it's delayed, or even ask Siri when the next bus is coming. And it just is really empowering and increases people's ability to access that information.
Thank you. That's amazing, and it's also really exciting to see that technology becoming available. I think we've been quite excited by some of the possibilities that Jen's talked to us about as well, and that we've seen. So finally, Brenton, I've got a question for you. So is there anything that you would suggest to people designing future cars that would make them more accessible for deaf people?
I think all cars are made for hearing people. They've got radios, for example. There's no thought about deaf people, and having that accessibility option, having extended vision in the car so that we can see ambulances or emergency vehicles. If there's an alert that can be put in the car that gives us a visual alert that those vehicles are coming, or if there's danger up ahead that we don't have the auditory access to. But in the future, I think, I believe that those improvements can be made.
Yeah, thank you. Lots of people nodding again in response to those comments. I think that we're really bringing forward some of the key points that need to be listened to in this event already. So I wanted to open up to the audience now. Please, would anybody like to ask a question to one of our panel, or all our panel members? Yeah. Please introduce yourself as you speak as well.
Significantly better for yourself?
Oh, gosh, that's a big question.
Yes.
I don't know, like, not being a sort of tech expert, I guess it's hard to name the one thing that would be really helpful, but I think just, it seems strange saying this at a symposium that's for technology, but in a way just remembering that technology in the way that we think of it, like phones or computers or iPads, isn't everything. I mean, the NDIS considers my guide dog a piece of assistive technology. So I think it's about being creative when we think of technology and the advances that we're making, and how can we sort of make use of, resources that we already have, or just, thinking a little bit outside the square when we think of what technology actually means. I don't know if that answers your question really, but obviously, as well as better access to Telstra services.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Somebody else like to ask a question? Yes.
Great. Thank you for that. Just really beautiful videos. But I think one of the things that really came to mind as a theme throughout all of them, and it was something Orhan mentioned explicitly, but everybody really mentioned, was this idea of dependency, right? And dependency as not a problem to be solved away. I think that so much of our dominant cultural and technological values and visions treat dependency as a deficit. They treat society as, and that's what dependency is. It's about having social relationships that you can depend on to help you during the day, and they treat society as a problem to solve with technologies. So I wonder but that's very anti-social and very anti-human in a lot of ways. And so I wonder if the panelists could talk about what would technologies or not, just a future society look like where dependency is treated as a design value rather than a design problem.
Would you like to answer that?
That's a question for an anthropologist.
Yeah, that's an Orhan question.
Okay, I will try to answer that. I think like it can be both a design value and a design problem depending on the society that technology is being introduced and depending on how that society wants to use technology. It also depends on the content of the social content of the society. So I will talk about Western countries since we are living in a Western society. I think in a Western society it might be problematic rather than value, and I will say why. Now, as we all know, Western society is built on individualism. It's built on individual foundation. And unfortunately, we are becoming more and more individualized and isolated. Yes, that technology may provide a degree of independency and may overcome our marginality to an extent, but in the long run, I'm talking about the Western societies here, it may even further isolate disabled people. Now, sometimes disabled people may have a difficulty socializing due to their disabilities. And this is not just the problem for disabled people, but for mainstream people as well. So when you look at it, there's an intersection of disabled people and with being and socially being exclusive. And technology, I think, if you're not careful with it, may further recluse disabled people from the society. Am I answering your question?
Yes, definitely.
Does anybody else want to respond? No, that's okay. Do we have another question in the audience? Yeah, one here. Damiano.
Thanks for the great session so far. Is there any piece of technology that you definitely don't want to see in the future?
Good.
I think that we need it to be an equitable technology, for all technologies, future technologies. We can't have it excluding groups of people. We need to have it being inclusive of everyone, and that develops greater understanding for the whole of community. And it increases our sense of belonging. I don't think that we should be excluded, and I think that those future technologies need to enable us to remain in contact with others, because, you know, everybody has different needs. Deaf people find it quite inhibiting in terms of perhaps communicating with other people, and technology is helpful in providing me a verbal voice. But if everybody was able to sign, for example, you know, or if Braille was accessible to everybody, not just those with a vision impairment, that degree of equitableness is important.
And I'll just add that I think that in terms of the technology that, that we wouldn't want to see is something that would take out, you know, too much of the human element and the joy and experiences that we get from travel and the experiences we get from discovering things about the world. My particular role in the past has been working much with children who are blind or have low vision, and there's a quote by, you know, someone named Joseph Carter who says, you know, for blind children, as for all children, the freedom of movement is fundamental to being human, and to learn how to be free in your own movement is such a joy. And you see that what children discover as they learn more about the world, and automatic doors that open are just a fascinating concept. You know, the first time that you're able to, travel and find your own kebab, and do that on your own is such a joy. But, you know, and so there's a fine balance between the amount of technology that we're adding in, and also, you know, we can have some great systems that tell us so much about the environment. So you think around an app like Microsoft Soundscape, it's telling us about the streets that we're walking past, it's telling us about some of the amenities and the stores that we're going past. But too much information would be too overwhelming. We're already using additional sensors like, you know, a sense of hearing and sense of, to be able to hear the parallel and perpendicular traffic. Also using the sense of touch on the cane or on the guide dog harness. But then also paying attention audibly to be able to hear all this additional information. And there is a bit of a fine balance to strike, because too much would impact on the primary mobility aid, like the cane or the dog. For some people, that might just be too overwhelming. So it is around, like Orhan said earlier, like that consultation and picking a fine balance between really useful skills that, you know, across the, you know, people with no matter what disability that we have. But let's just talk around the blind travel skills, how important they are on top, you know, and then the technology on top is really just that kind of icing on the cake.
May I please add to that as well, Darren? Now, when we think about technology, people immediately tend to think about laptop computers, iPhones, batteries, and cars, and so on. But surprise, surprise, this kind is also a technology as well, even though it may be invented like 50 or 60. I think they began to use it for blind people during after the Second World War, when people lost their eyesight, and they were in the hospital. So it was originally used to help blind people to find their way. So this is a form of technology as well. Sometimes people make the mistake of technology just being restricted to computers and programs. That's not always the case. Any form of device that helps humans is a type of technology. I just wanted to underline that again. Thanks a lot.
Michaela, did you have something that you don't want us to have in the future?
I guess a couple of unpopular opinions maybe, but... oh, sorry, Ellie. I'll throw my drink bottle away, never mind. I work in theatre. I have to do something dramatic like that. Just quickly, like, I think I would say both electric vehicles and driverless cars, the way that they are being designed now, I think there's probably definitely a way to make them accessible, but like, yeah, I can't hear an electric car coming at the moment in Australia. You know, it's not legal for them to have like an audible engine. And so, yeah, sometimes, particularly in the city, you know, I feel pretty nervous about crossing a road. I don't know if I might miss something. Yeah, but also, I don't know, this idea of, driverless cars, and not just that I don't know if I'd feel comfortable sitting in one, but I don't know, you know, if I feel confident to be a pedestrian on the road as they're driving past. I just, don't know if they're looking out for me in the same way that a caring human would. But I don't know much about what the discussions are around all of that at the moment, but I haven't heard that many disabled people have been consulted in that. So, I just have some concerns about how accessible that will be, and whether, everyone's is being considered in that decision-making process. So, as they are at the moment, I'm not sure about those, pieces of technology, I guess.
Yeah, Melissa.
Melissa, I have a question. I don't know yet very well how I'm going to articulate it, but I hope it comes out with some sense. So we've been talking, or you've been talking about technologies that you would like, that you wouldn't like, and the value of different senses when navigating public transport and the human aspect of it. So my question would be, what are some things, similar to the previous question, but from the people side of things. So what are some things that you wish people who travel with you would not do, or that you wish they would do? I think I heard before the term mainstream people to make your traveling just easier or more enjoyable.
I suppose I can answer that one as well. Sometimes, like when we get onto the buses or trams or trains, I would like people to move their stuff aside if it's possible. Now I realise that may not always be possible, because the public transports are sometimes crowded, particularly in the peak hours. But sometimes some people are just in their own world. Here, you can get back to technology again. Either they are messaging someone or receiving messages, or they're just like on their earphones and they're daydreaming. And sometimes, like, when you bump into their belongings, they kind of like breathe in a strange way, and they kind of say, think it's your fault. But when they look at you and see your cane, they go, oh, okay, this person cannot see. Like, I would like people, or other tram passengers, to be more cautious of the environment. Like they always say to blind people, oh, you have to pay attention to your environment. Yeah, we do that. I think we tend to do that more than the mainstream people. But mainstream people themselves, they don't pay as much attention to the environment. And they become addicted to their mobile phones, their iPhones.
Another thing to add to that would probably be one of the most important, and in my opinion, is that people can do, the public can do, is to always ask first, declare yourself and ask first. Does somebody need assistance? Because, and you see that's really empowering again to the person. If someone's travelling, regardless of the disability, mobility issue, if someone says, would you like some assistance across the road, for example, as opposed to, if I grabbed Orhan's arm and just yanked him across the road, he might not want to go across the road. And sometimes, it's, I was at a shopping centre recently and someone dropped their long cane, and some magical fairy, a person in the crowd, just came and picked it up and put it back, and that person's searching for it on the ground. I said, someone's come and picked it up and put it against the count, the Bain Marie, but they didn't tell you. Or so people are looking for to get through, the Mikey barrier, and all of a sudden, this same magical fairy comes and kind of pushes you through the right gate. And this is something that kind of happens really regularly from well-meaning people, but that declaring, hi, would you like some assistance through the gate? that gives that person, that empowers the person to say, yes, please, I would like it, or no, I actually know what I'm doing, thank you very much.
As well.
Sure.
And sometimes some people are also afraid of approaching disabled people as well because they don't know how to interact with us. And the second reason to do this is about being independent again. Some people are afraid that if you ask someone if they need help, that they may tell them off severely because they love their independence. And in fact, this has happened to a few taxi drivers and few Uber drivers, that they were trying to help disabled people and they were really told them off. No, don't help me. Or sometimes they were even told by disabled people to get effed. So it basically goes, it's two ways when you look at it. Sometimes it's the fault of the disabled person and sometimes it is the misunderstanding of the person who's trying to help.
I guess just, something to remember is that everybody is different. So, one blind person might require one kind of assistance, taking your elbow and being guided that way. Another blind person might want something different. And yeah, I guess it's just, about all of us remembering to be, patient with each other and remembering that we're all individual human beings with, different access requirements and,
Brenton, do you have anything you'd like to say about that?
I think I agree with what the other panellists have said, that we need to be considerate of other people like we would anyone, elderly people, people who are pregnant. We just need to be considerate. We need to think about every member of community and think about equity. And I think that's quite difficult.
Okay, thank you. Oh, we have another question from Miguel. I don't think the questions are going to stop.
Sorry. This is a question for Jeni. You mentioned before that you learned a lot during the process while doing the films. And I was wondering if you now imagine something that you would like to see as a filmmaker in the future to convey what they are experiencing in these particular situations.
Possibly not related to transport, but definitely related to making accessible films. The frustration to try and get audio descriptions created in time, to get people here to do audio descriptions. We had 3-month lead time and it still didn't happen. So, there's a lot of, I think there's not a lot of people around that do them, so there's not a lot of access, but it possibly could be and I do use AI transcriptions to do my editing. They're not very good, but I use Otter AI when I edit because I've shot and I edit myself, so I can just sort of approximate that's where she said this, that's where she said that, but they're definitely not good enough to use for audio descriptions or subtitles yet. So that's got a little bit of a way to go, and I think particularly that really stood out for me, that the lack of audio descriptions. There's a big barrier, and it means there's just not a lot of films that are accessible out there for blind audiences because it's not easy enough to put them on yet. The subtitles is definitely easier, and that's getting easier to do, but that still excludes a whole part of the deaf population who can't read subtitles. So definitely I think I've got a feel for what I'd like to see more in terms of accessible filmmaking through the process of working together with this group. I'm not Jeni, but I was wondering if I could add something to that, of something that I've learned from working with a filmmaker, because I guess, yes, sure a lot of other people have experience. Sometimes when the media tries to tell your story, it doesn't come across in the way that you would like. And often I found, my story as a blind person and coming from a family of 3 blind siblings, it's like our story is often either portrayed as, a story of pity or a story to make people feel good.
and just inspire them and help them get through the day, but it doesn't really inform or encourage people, I guess, to, all the things we've been talking about, ask people, see people sort of equally human and all those sorts of things. And yeah, I've just really enjoyed this experience because I really felt that my story was heard, and I really appreciated that Jeni was happy to take on board feedback about the film. And yeah, I really feel that all of the messages that I wanted to get across to you guys tonight have been sort of portrayed in a way that I feel like it says what I wanted to say, and that's has been quite a rare experience for me. And I think that's something that you could all take away in terms of working on these sorts of research projects in future, is just really listening to people's stories. And I think that's how we learn about each other's needs and how to make things better in future. So thanks for that, Jeni. That's something I've appreciated.
Connects with a question that I want to ask, actually, because as an anthropologist, I spend a lot of my time thinking about the limitations of what's called consultation, especially when consultation is just basically to tell people what's going to happen and to try to ask you to agree. And so I think I wanted to ask all of you, so if future automated technologies are going to be designed which could support you in ways that are useful and meaningful to you, what kind of consultation processes would you find useful? What would be the best way for you to actually communicate what was needed and to actually have that input into a design and development process? I know that's a big question and difficult thing to think of on the spot, but I think for me it's very important to understand that there are better ways than I think exists now.
Yeah, I'm happy to start off that question. Is I suppose it's in my role at Vision Australia, I've seen that consultation happen. I've also seen it not happen. In terms of like the consultation maybe happening too late. For example, you walk out, if anyone caught a tram here tonight, you can just walk out and see an example of it. The consultation around how the tram line is separated between the bike path, which for a lot of people who are blind and have low vision, it's difficult to know that when you're standing on a bike path that you're kind of right in the line of where people are riding their bike. There's not, there are some tactile tiles there, but there wasn't a whole lot of consultation prior to that. But then you've got, Public Transport Victoria run a program called Travelling in the Shoes of Others, which has been a really great one where, people from, different blindness agencies or, Urala, different agencies who support people who have any type of mobility need, they'll have their engineers or they'll have their design team or even the people who operate the system travel and do a particular travel route either under blindfold, low vision simulators, in a wheelchair or a motorised vehicle to use the system and then come back and kind of talk about it. But I think there is a lot to be said around sort of a real life experience. And I always kind of add that disclaimer to people that obviously what you experience initially today under blindfold isn't what someone who's totally blind would experience, because it's something that we're used to, and we've, a lot of people have grown up and experienced life in that way, but to you it's a bit of a shock. But even still, it can be of use to sort of people enlightened to sort of see some of the challenges themselves and coming back and discussing it as a group across the entire spectrum of a number of people with mobility issues and hearing everyone's opinion, rather so we don't have a slant to only cater for vision impaired people, but we kind of forgot about people with a hearing impairment or people with additional mobility needs. So that kind of group consultation, I think it's worked really well.
I think consultation process is important, I would say, why? Because when you look at roads and travelling, like particularly roads, railways, I'm sure many anthropologists will agree with this, they are integral for nations and national building. Now, when you're building roads, And railways, if you don't properly consult disabled people or people with disability, you are marginalising them in the nation. You are not enabling them to participate in the modern life of the so-called nation. Am I being clear, everyone?
Yeah, absolutely. And also, do we have more questions from the audience now? So we have, and then Annette's in front, so two lined up. Please just pop your hands up, people, in the meantime, and I'll try and keep an eye out and make a list.
Thank you so much. Dan Angus from Queensland University of Technology. So I'm going to relate a little bit, I guess, to my own lived experience in Meanjin, Brisbane. And at the moment, Brisbane is exploring lots of these e-mobility transport schemes, so electric scooters, bicycles. And I basically spend every morning and afternoon as I'm going to and from work on my bicycle, clearing the paths of these various devices to and from work that are kind of left haphazardly parked. And I was thinking about Jathan's comment before about the idea of community and about a lot of technologies kind of distancing us from that notion of community and togetherness, and whether you felt that there are certain innovations that are creating a, I guess, hazardous or toxic kind of urban environment that is driving, kind of moving us in a bad direction, right? That we're creating a kind of a hostile city and a hostile environment, and particularly where mobility is the driver of that real hostility. I'll give one other example. I've got some friends who are experience anxiety around, incredibly busy visual environments, and even things like advertising pollution of the number of, advertisements that they're kind of bombarded with are things that cause them great anxiety when they're kind of leaving their homes and moving through the city. We have a huge amount of this advertising and other very, bright, a lot of electric lights now as well that cause them, considerable distress. So that they certainly feel, I know, that this is a very hostile environment. I'm wondering if that's your experience or if you've experienced otherwise.
If I could add, I will respond to that. Say, for example, I'm on a train and there's a horn and people stand for an emergency alert. I have no idea as to what that is, and I feel very frightened because there's no visual alert. If there was an orange light, for example, deaf people would see that as a warning. And, I feel quite concerned when hearing people receive an auditory message and I see their reactions, but I have no idea what the message is that they've received. It is fear-inducing. If there were some kind of visual alert to that to explain to me what was going on, that would be beneficial.
I was thinking about that too, and I'm not someone who can sort of speak to this with any authority because I only have the one disability, but it's important to think of people who have multiple disabilities. So I'm thinking of a deafblind person and how, they wouldn't be able to hear or see those sorts of notifications. So, really being creative with how we, implement changes like that and remembering that, you don't just have a blind person or a deaf person or a person with autism. Some people have multiple disabilities, and so that's just, again, I guess another example of why a consultation is so important and need to have multiple strategies in place.
And Michaela, I was thinking, because sometimes what is necessarily useful for someone who's blind to travel can even be, can be troublesome for someone maybe in a wheelchair. We see the example of like tactile ground surface indicators. Really great for someone who's blind to find with their cane and line up to cross the road in a straight line, or walk safely along a train platform with enough distance from the platform. But then for someone in a wheelchair, that can potentially cause more trouble.
Tip them out of their wheelchair.
It can be bumpy and uncomfortable, and also things like approaching a road. It's really great when it's kind of a really clear pram ramp that's clear that says, the footpath is sloping down, so I'm approaching a road. But and then the same thing on the other side of across the road, and now the pram ramp starts going up. But if it's too steep, that's it's really great because it's really easily be able to be detected by someone who's blind. But for someone in a wheelchair, you know, that adds another complexity around getting up and down those pram ramps. So it is that consultation with across the spectrum.
I think here we can use the concept of multiculturalism to cater for disabled people as well. Like, of course, people with disabilities we are not ethnicities, but well, that's debatable. I wouldn't say that we are ethnicities, but the concept of ethnicity or ethnic can be used to cater for people with diverse disabilities and to consult the needs and diverse disabilities, and in a way to the state or the government can construct policies to target multiple disabled people and their needs.
Okay, so I think we have just time left for one last question, which is Annette's. Maybe we can squeeze the final one in. We'll see how the time goes.
Well, I was thinking about the whole conference on automated decision making and how much of some of the automated decision making, I mean, beyond the very structural technologies or the assistance that you might get, there's these personalized, very personalized kind of algorithmically determined suggestions, and I'm thinking of, Darren, when you were talking about how you could get these sort of soundscapes that might give you advice or suggestions for where you might want to go. And I was thinking about, in relation to Sarah's question about consultation and thinking about tech design, and I'm speaking also as as a naive mainstreamer. Okay, so this might be a very simplistic question, but how much do tech designers actually consult with you about the multiplicity of technologies that you might experience at one time, and whether or not you experience a lot of information overload in those environments, and what would you suggest for making better algorithmic designs or developments that would be more useful for you? Or is there just going to be a big disconnect? I mean, and maybe because I kind of perceive there would be this big disconnect between what people think you need and the kind of personalization that happens in a lot of apps and what you actually end up needing or wanting, and how much do you control that?
Sure. You're right. I mean, I suppose there is this kind of, maybe a broad preconception that, if you're missing visual information, let's give you an app that will give you all the information in audio format. That would help solve the problem, right? But it's around, like I said before, it's that kind of finding something that has this fine balance between acknowledging, like, the amazing skills that someone, because I work in the field and I have a low vision, but the skills that someone who is blind and has low vision is using to travel and how useful they are and how important they are, layering the technology on top to maybe add some assistance as, that, cream on top. But, apps that we, for example, in the video that you saw Orhan using some apps, those three, Microsoft Soundscape, Clue and Aira are specifically, they're apps specifically designed for people who are blind and have low vision to travel. So there's quite a lot of consultation with the app developer themselves, and also with the blindness low vision community, and also maybe people who do, my role as an orientation and mobility specialist, like what is kind of like the balance of information we give. And for example, that there's some, and each of those apps have an orientation mobility instructor on their team, as they do consult regularly with the blindness low vision community. But then, you have some apps that kind of will tell you about all the different sounds and, different how tall buildings are will make a different sound, and you know, trying to sort of add this kind of like full immersive experience of information in an auditory way. And it sort of sounds good, but actually, would it be good? Because that might just, we really don't want to get hit by a car while we're paying attention to that, which is priority. So they do. So there is a lot of consultation, particularly with those apps that are designed for people who are blind, low vision. But in terms of the mainstream apps, you know, you think around a really brilliant app like Google Maps. One of the amazing features that has come out, you know, is the live view function. If you jump on your phone later and you go for a walk, and you plan the route from here to, you know, whatever pub you want to go to after here, you'll see that if you press live view, you'll get like this augmented reality view with arrows pointing across the screen of the way you want to go. But it's not accessible to someone who's blind, who doesn't have visual access. But how useful would it be if it did? So I suppose it is a, you know, it's kind of continually trying to find this balance between accessibility and also the amount of information that is useful, and also perhaps apps in the design phase, apps that can kind of give you a choice between wanting to know about the chairs that you're passing or only wanting to know about the roads, or wanting to know about, you know, the shop names, or only wanting to know about a particular shop that you're looking for. So it is sometimes just in the design phase offering a choice in the way that you navigate through that app, perhaps.
I just think options are important because, for example, even if you're thinking about one disability, and I'm sorry, I'm going to talk about blindness again because that's what I know, specialise in, being blind, but like some people are really good at spatial awareness, quite natural at it, can just look at a map or hear a sense of verbal directions once from like a GPS app and they know where they need to go. That's not one of my strengths. You know, I've always had trouble looking at, for example, sometimes I would be given raised sort of tactile maps on a piece of paper, and I really struggled to understand them because it was just a, two-dimensional, lot of shapes and lines that I couldn't understand, and so that's meant that I've also found it really hard to adapt to using apps like Google Maps, and I just find mental mapping really hard, but I love something like Soundscape because it gives me an immersive kind of audio idea of what's around. I can hear if a shop is to the left or to the right, because if I'm wearing earphones, it changes like if it's a shop on my left, it'll play on my left ear. So that's really worked for me because it kind of, I often feel like until I've physically walked a route, I don't really understand it. So I guess it's just about having options out there and people learn things and acquire information in different ways. So it's just, I don't think you'll ever get one app that can sort of provide everyone's needs, but it's about trying to ensure that there are options out there.
Can I add something about like sound pollution and all that, based on what has Darren said? Can I do that, Sarah?
Yes, quickly though.
Okay, I'll do that very
Time is
quickly.
up.
Well, I basically would like to criticise George Simmel. Then he was a naive sociologist who made these big claims about blind people, and he basically said our blind people don't experience any anxieties or stresses. Well, surprise, we do, because of voice pollution, because of the accessibility of the landscape, and so on. So I think that's what I would like to say about like intellectuals can also be naivety, and these sort of conferences and panels will definitely help us to overcome these naiveties.
Wonderful, thank you. And I think with that in mind, when you all read Emma's reports, please, which reports on the industry visions for future automated mobilities, please keep in mind the films and everything that's been said in this panel discussion, because I think it really does show how naive those dominant industry narratives and visions of future automated mobilities really are, and how they need to be revised and rethought. So Thank you so much, everybody. Jeni, Emma, Orhan, Darren, Michaela and Brenton, thank you so much for your wonderful contributions tonight. It's been wonderful. It's fantastic to listen to you.